Hi everyone. In this lecture, we're just going to be talking very briefly about culture and cultural competence. Social workers are sort of known for their ability to work across cultures and to sort of bring in the importance of culture into the context of whatever helping relationship is going on. And I always sort of think of culture as something that we all know what it is, but it's kind of hard to maybe put a definition to it. So let me just share with you real quick three sort of ideas about culture. And so culture might be the shared beliefs, attitudes, norms, roles, and behaviors transmitted among members of a group. It might be transmitted, from older members to younger members, and then kind of across members. Culture might also be, let me advance the slide here, a way of life or a pattern of behavior related to beliefs and traditions and art and maybe religious practice, social relationships. Um, Culture sort of perpetuates these ideas and beliefs and values, and not all of those things are necessarily bad. I mean, culture might perpetuate traditions around food or spirituality or certain kinds of dance or song. And of course, culture could also transmit some maybe toxic values as well. But for the most part, culture transmits very positive and meaningful things, right? And we probably all can think of examples from our own lives. Culture. You might have been given a favorite recipe for something from a beloved elder or something like that, or there might be a particular food group that's or food or a dish that's sort of common to that's sort of beloved in your family or something like that. Anyway, here's the third kind of definition of culture, and this one comes from Hofstede. The collective programming of the mind that distinguishes one group of people from another. The mind in this case is the head, the heart, the hands, the thinking, the feeling, the acting. Culture is, in a sense, values. Systems of values are kind of this core element of culture. Now, one of the things I said, let me move myself up here, is that social workers are sort of known for their ability to work across cultures and bring in culture into kind of the context of the helping relationship. But one of the things that requires us to do is to be aware of our own culture, and when we're imposing our cultural beliefs onto someone else. Um, so a couple of kind of unstated assumption here. People are connected, right? And because people are connected, there are certain people who are sort of part of that connection, and people who are sort of not part of that that connection. So there are people who are sort of part of that culture and not part of that culture, and understanding the boundaries is kind of important. The second bullet point gets to what I just said a second ago, and that's that um, if we're unaware of our own cultural beliefs, it's very easy for us to impose um, our culture over top of someone else's, and that's one of the ways that oppression, discrimination, things like that are perpetuated. And so social workers really develop an awareness of our own culture and sort of the importance of culture in others. Um, Now, let's talk about sort of just how many cultures there might be in a planet, for example. So there are, frankly, so many cultures, and there are so many sort of variations within cultures that it would be impossible for a single course or a single graduate program or even a single degree from university to cover everything that's meaningful about all of the particular cultures that exist. So, because that's frankly impossible, I mean, you could spend a lifetime learning about one culture, let alone the dozens and dozens and dozens of cultures that might exist. And so, um, what what social workers have is something called cultural competence. I'm going to give you a replacement word here for that in a second. But cultural competence really, what that really means is that um, instead of learning about about all of the cultures that you might encounter in a given job. You really learn about your own culture and reflect on how your culture might butt up against the culture of someone else in the context of a helping relationship. The other term that's sort of used kind of in conjunction, or maybe in opposition to cultural competence, is cultural humility. And what cultural humility is saying is that I cannot possibly know everything there is to know about your culture. So I'm going to make part of our work, I'm going to devote part of our time working together for you to tell me about what's important about your culture so that I can make sure we're incorporating that in our work together moving forward. Now, there was a debate for a while about sort of should cultural humility kind of replace cultural competence. And what's, the way this is kind of settling is that a good social worker needs both cultural competence and cultural humility. These are not, opposites or necessarily or even necessarily synonymous, but really what they are is complementary to one another. So we strive for both cultural competence and cultural humility. Of course, one of the ways we sort of enact cultural competence, maybe cultural humility, is that we don't automatically assume something we've learned from a member of one culture applies to a member of another culture, or a different member of the same culture. We sort of approach each person in a kind of person-centered way. Now, like I said, cultural competence and cultural humility really are journeys. They're not destinations. So you can never be sort of perfectly cultural competent or have perfect sort of cultural humility. Rather, this is always something we're endeavoring to continue to develop. So how do we develop sort of culturally informed and responsive practice? Well, we use supervision. We're open to learning about culture in different ways, maybe with literature or through art or music or food, or through engaging with cultural informants, people who are knowledgeable, particularly clients. And then we establish sort of a collaborative network, right? A way to get to know a way to get to know people, particularly in the areas in which we're working. So, just a quick summary. It is very difficult to gain all of the knowledge you need about a specific culture, and that's simply because culture is so rich. Any one culture is so rich, and then because there are so many cultures, right, that are so rich, it's just an impossibility to be able to sort of learn about everything you might potentially need. So, like I said, I'm an advocate for sort of this cultural humility and cultural competence, sort of complementary model of things. So I will leave it there. As always, thanks for watching, and feel free to be in touch if you have any questions.